Good evening, everyone. So as my colleague explained, today we're going to be discussing how to maintain your visa and stay legal in the UK. So as you're probably aware, there's been several sort of questions, especially surrounding those who are skilled workers. For example, you may possibly have had an issue with your employer where their sponsor license has been suspended or if their sponsor license has been revoked. So you are probably in a position where you're panicking and you're thinking, how do I maintain my visa? So in such situations, it can, like I said, be stressful for you in the event that you don't really have options available to you. So some people may think that there's very limited to none in terms of the options, whereas what you can technically do is apply for a switch, but then you're probably thinking, how do I go about that? Because the switches are taking time to come through. Because I know with the Home Office, they're currently taking around 16 to 18 weeks to consider certificate of sponsorships coming through. So with regards to that, there are several options available, and I will go into explaining that. But I think there are a few questions in the chat which I'd like to address. So someone's asked, can I work an extra 20 hours in Waitrose when I have a skilled worker visa? So initially, when there was, for example, carer visas, they stated that you can only work 20 hours in the same job occupation code. But at the moment, you are actually able to work an extra 20 hours in an additional job that doesn't contain the same job occupation code as yours. So yes, you can. Um, so in terms of how to respond to the Home Office, you applied for a fee waiver 5 days before your 60 days was due to expire, and due to financial constraints, you applied for your visa as the main applicant, and then you applied for your dependents after your visa came out. So the dependents received an email from the Home Office to ask why apply um, with the main applicant at the same time. So you can be entirely honest to say that you had financial constraints, which is why the dependents were applied for after, and now you've got the necessary funds, so now you wish to apply for your dependents. Um, so I think in terms of that, you can state that. I just wanted to check, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes, we can
So,
hear you.
in terms of the question that someone asked, if a cost is applied for before the due date, should you stay in the UK and should you continue to drive or not? Um, or should you wait for the cost to come out? Initially, in terms of the costs, ideally, to work in a certain job, you're supposed to be waiting for your cost to come out in order to be able to work. So I hope that addresses your query. Um, and someone also asked, when applying for a fee waiver, do you have to apply with dependents as well at the same time? So in terms of dependents, ideally, I think it's good to mention your dependents at the same time, just purely because you don't want the Home Office to ask you why um you're applying for the dependents after. So it's just because the fee waiver is free, you're not really losing out on anything. So it is good to mention your dependents in the fee waiver in itself. Um Another question is, if you're renewing your visa, do you have to pay the health surcharge? So, in all honesty, the answer to that is it depends on what visa you're looking to renew. Because when it comes to, for example, health care visas, you don't have to pay a health surcharge, whereas if you're a skilled worker, you do have to pay a health surcharge. Someone also asked, can you apply for a BRP visa when I'm outside the UK? I lost my visa when I was outside. So there is an option to apply for a replacement visa, but if you mean that you no longer have a visa, you'd have to make the appropriate application to be able to come back into the UK. So it depends on what application um you're making. But if you've lost it, there is on the government website and an option which does say replace my BRP, and it will talk you through the steps of what to do when if you lost your biometric card. Um, Someone said, my employer has no hours. Can I apply to study under my current skilled worker visa? So you can apply to study, um, or you can even apply to switch as a student if you've got the funds, because that's also an option to be able to maintain your visa. So that's also an option. There's also a question where someone's asked if the sponsor license is withdrawn, what can you do? So if your sponsor license has been withdrawn, um, you can look for a switch, or are you a sponsor? Whereas if you're a skilled worker and the actual sponsor's license has been withdrawn, then the best option is look for a switch. If you can find one. If you realize that you're nearing the end of your visa, I will explain a little bit about what you can do in order to be able to maintain it shortly. Um, Someone also explained that the dependent visa is left with 5 weeks of expiry. What can they do to stay legal? So, in terms of what you can do, you can explore your options in terms of can possibly explore the options of being a student if you've got the funds. You may possibly have formed a new relationship whilst you're in the UK. So you might be in a relationship with someone that's British or settled. So you might want to register your marriage, or you may have a British child, for example, so you may wish to make an application as a parent. Or, for example, you may want to even apply as a skilled worker in your own right. And if you wish to do that and you've realized that you're only heading to, like, let's say, a week before your visa's due to expire, there is an option of applying for a fee waiver. Now, that's basically step one of two. So the fee waiver is essentially a way to buy you time in order to be able to maintain your visa. So it just allows you to explore the idea of maybe looking for an alternative visa or a switch if you want to stay legal. So that is an option for you where you can do that. But like I said, the fee waiver is step one of step two. So I don't suggest that you wait for the fee waiver to be decided, and that you keep actively looking for an alternative route for yourself within that time. So step two is usually what you call an FLR-HRO application, which is basically an application based on exceptional circumstances. So it really depends on what your situation is. So to say that, for example, your dependent visa has been curtailed, or to say that your sponsor's license has been revoked, that would not be a valid explanation under an FLR-HRO application. So a valid explanation would be something like you've got completely exceptional circumstances, you've got strong medical circumstances, you may be like very severely ill, to the extent that if you don't get the treatment, that will limit your life. So those are the kind of circumstances that are classed as exceptional. But as I said, to do the fee waiver, it's essentially a way of buying you time. So I think that would be very helpful for you, um, if you do explore the options in that sense. So another question was, Is the fee waiver free? Yes, the fee waiver is free because the fee waiver application in itself is essentially telling the Home Office that I can't afford the Home Office fees. So it's saying I can't afford the Home Office fees to make an application that I intend to make, or so the fee waiver fee in itself is free. Whereas if you were to ask ourselves to do it, due to the limited capacity that we've got and due to the urgency, we would charge. And the way in which you can inquire about that is you can go onto our website, www.tulia.org.uk, and you can make an inquiry about how to go about doing a fee waiver. And we'll be more than happy to assist, because there are members of our team that can assist with that issue if you are facing that. So someone also asked that their sponsor license was removed on the 5th of April and they've not received any communication about it. How do they go about that? So if you mean that you're waiting for the Home Office to write to you, it can actually essentially take quite a few months for the Home Office to write to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that they'll write to you immediately, but when they do write to you, they will provide a date as to when your visa is due to expire, and they will give you the option of making an alternative application, or they will tell you to leave the UK. So it will be entirely up to you as to what you do at that point. But as I said, if you want to maintain your visa, you'd need to look at options. If you notice that you're running out of time and that you've got a week or two left on your visa, then I recommend acting quickly on it, in the sense that you either make an alternative application or you put in an application for a fee waiver if you are waiting on for example, a certificate of sponsorship to be allocated to you and the allocations are not yet coming through, but you would have to seek permission from the prospective employer to that's wishing to hire you, to say, are you willing to give me a visa? Can you possibly give me something in writing to say that you are willing to give me a visa? Because then that kind of secures your options, and then you can use that and present it to the Home Office. This is why I say it's very important to get the permission of the prospective employer. So in terms of if you haven't worked and you're not paying tax, will it be a problem in renewing the visa? So it might not necessarily be a problem in the actual renewal in itself, but it will count towards the indefinite leave. So you would need to act on it quite quickly. So what I'd recommend is if your employer isn't giving you hours or if they're not paying the correct tax, have a word with them, because they are obliged to give you the hours, because that's what they said they're going to maintain on your certificate of sponsorship. So they are legally required to give you that under your contract as well. So have a word with them, see if you can negotiate, and if they can offer you the hours. If they can't, I would recommend looking for an alternative sponsorship license. Again, someone also asked if the company sponsor license is suspended, what can I do? So if your license is suspended, I would recommend looking for alternative options to see if you can find a switch. And I know looking for switches can be hard, but I just recommend looking actively. There are always places where they are hiring. You don't necessarily have to look for a company that's offering within the care sector. There's other sectors such as, for example, teaching. There's other sectors like restaurants that are hiring for sponsorship licensing for skilled workers. So it just means that if you're switching from a healthcare visa, that you'll have to pay certain application fees and the skills charge and the health surcharge. So you would need to explore those options, and I recommend looking at those. So in terms of Rachel's question, where she asked, since the visa holders have no recourse to public funds, how is it that they can then get a fee waiver? Because what you're essentially asking is that I cannot afford the Home Office fees to make an application, and I'm potentially looking for a switch. So I just need time to be able to regularize my stay. So what it is you're not asking for public funds, you're asking them to be able to give you that little bit of time to be able to maintain your visa and to prevent yourself from becoming illegal in the system. So I think essentially you're not asking for recourse to public funds, you're asking for time. So that is something that, can be considered. Which is why I recommend don't wait for the fee waiver to be decided. Um, Find yourself that switch or find yourself that alternative route within that time because it shows that you're actively acting on your visa and you're not waiting for yourself to become illegal. Um, Someone mentioned that they were resigned and the employer didn't cancel their visa, and according to now that their visa is still valid when checking online, and the same as the husband's visa, and it's 7 months till it's left, and they didn't receive any sort of um 60-day letter or email. Would you still have a chance to get into the UK? Your husband's got a job. Can he go in? Is there any chances of a switch if is it possible to switch from outside of the UK or you need to be in the UK? So with switches, the way in which they work is you ideally need to be in the UK to be able to do the switch. If your visa is showing that it's valid and you've got a valid biometric card, it may be that the employer hasn't yet reported it on the system, which is possibly why you haven't received that letter from the Home Office. And with that letter, it depends on when you've resigned as well, because that letter can take months to reach you. So you may potentially have a chance, but you would have to try. The other option would be to make a fresh visa application, where your husband's the main sponsor. Sorry, the main applicant, and you are the dependent from outside of the UK, but it would be a fresh application for a visa, and then I would just recommend putting the circumstances into the form to say that you actually left the UK to prevent yourself from overstaying, and now you've got a valid visa and you wish to re-enter as a skilled worker. Okay, and in terms of someone mentioned that they got a fake they was given a fake cost to submit to the Home Office, um and you found out the next day and you have to withdraw your application, and now you've got another cost from the company. Do you need a new application or use the previous application which you withdrew to submit the new cost? So I would recommend doing the fresh application, um and to apply and to basically explain that this is the fresh application where you've got a cost from a new company, and you wish to be employed under that company. So someone also asked, can you still bring over dependents under the skilled worker visa even after switching from your original costs? So it depends on when you, as the main visa holder, made your application. As long as you made it before the 11th of March when the rules came into effect, because of the fact that you're in the UK at the time, you can still bring your dependents over. Someone also asked how much is the visa fee for renewing your skilled worker visa? So, the actual term skilled worker visa is very broad in itself, because there's several types of skilled worker visas. So there's health and care visas, and there's also just skilled worker visas where, for example, you might be employed as a teacher, you may be employed as an accountant, you may be employed as a chef. So it really does depend on the fee, and it depends on how many years you're applying for as well. Someone also mentioned that you recently got a switch and you was asked by your employer to give notice to resign. And you resigned this month and the new employer started your cost application recently. You realized that it won't be out by the time you're supposed to with them. Is it possible to start with them before the cost is out, or do you need to wait for it? So you would need to wait for the new employer to issue the cost to work with them. Um, and if you're still employed under your current employer, and you're still receiving the hours, then you can work you can work 20 hours as an additional job, just with the new employers until the cost comes out. But that's only if you're employed by the current employer. Or if, for example, you make an application for the fee waiver, which should buy you a few months time. So at the moment, fee waivers are taking around 4 or 5 months to be decided, which is the current turnaround time. But again, it can vary. Someone mentioned that there are healthcare assistants on a skilled worker visa and their company has been suspended. Can you switch to another job to get sponsorship? Yes, you can switch to another job to get a sponsorship. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to work in the healthcare sector. You can look on the list of registered sponsors on the government website to see there are quite a few different sponsorships available. There's quite a few different companies that are hiring. So you can have a look to see what options are available to you. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you are that you're a healthcare assistant. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be a healthcare visa. Someone also mentioned the sponsorship has been suspended and one of the child has turned 18. If you get a switch, what happens? Um, as a child is already 18, it might be difficult to apply for your child because um, with 18-year-olds, with it's very, very difficult in terms of success rates. And they usually recommend applying under their own right. So they might possibly want to explore the option of being a student and coming to the UK, or maybe even applying for a sponsorship in their own right, if you can even maybe get them within your company. So that's also an option. Right. And someone also mentioned that the sponsor license was revoked and never worked any hours. They're working 20 hours as supplementary employment. And um, the fact that they did not work full-time hours for the sponsor, even though the right to work is valid, can you still find another employer to like switch? So ideally, what we recommend doing is finding yourself the switch. I think that might be the easiest option for you. And then because the 20 hours is basically part of the visa where um you can work as an additional job, provided that you've got a valid certificate of sponsorship and you're getting the hours that you should be getting. So that's the purpose of working the 20 hours um supplementary. It's not meant to take over um the actual main cost in itself. And if you were to do that, then you'd ideally need a new certificate of sponsorship. Someone mentioned that they're on a spouse visa and they'd like to switch to a care visa. What will happen to the dependents if they're already in the UK? So you would be eligible to switch your dependents over onto your visa as your dependents. So that would be the best option for you. Someone also mentioned that switches for males are a burden. Do we have any leads? Um, Ideally, I understand where you're coming from, that there is a high demand for female carers, but you can try mental health sectors and maybe like companies within the NHS that might be helpful for you. Um, Someone also mentioned that they made their application before their visa expired on the 28th of March, and they haven't done the biometrics up until now, and the sponsor has lost their license. Is the visa application complete? Am I still legal? So is there any particular reason as to why you haven't done your biometrics? Um, because in order for an application process to be complete, you do need to have done your biometrics, because that is part of the process. So ideally you would need to do that. Right. And I do apologize. We're getting quite a few questions, so I'm just trying to go through as many as I can. So someone's also mentioned that they found a new employer and they're willing to sponsor, but they don't have enough information on how to get a sponsor license, especially what the cost is, or how to sort of go about getting the license and what to do. So I would recommend that they book in a consultation with us, so you can direct them to our website www.tulia.org.uk. There is options to book business consultations. So I recommend that they book the business consultation with us, and we can go through the step by step on how to get a sponsorship license, what the costs are, and when getting the license, how to sponsor an employee. So we can go through that process, and we can even offer them packages on how to be able to maintain their license once they also get it. Because I think at the moment, in order to be able to get a license, there's a procedure that needs to be followed, and provided that you've followed it and you've carried out and maintained the procedure in a proper way, um, then that will be beneficial not just for the sponsor, but it will be beneficial for so many people that are in similar situations, such as yourselves. Someone mentioned they've applied for asylum and they've been waiting for the main interview. And whilst waiting, they was allowed to work. However, 2 months ago, you received a letter to say that you missed the interview appointment, but you did not receive the letter. You've received every other letter the Home Office has sent, but not the appointment letter, and they've withdrawn the case. You went to the refugee centre to seek advice, and they contacted the Home Office explaining that you didn't get the letter, that you was willing to go to the Home Office. You was willing to go, but the Home Office refused, and you wrote to them again and still received no response. What do you advise um to do? Okay, so in such a situation, if they've not responded to the next request, you can write a letter which is a pre-action protocol for judicial review. What that's essentially doing is it's challenging that you haven't received the refusal, you haven't received the interview invite, and you were still willing to go ahead, and you've explained that. So I think that might be an option that you wish to explore. But for such a process, um, I do recommend getting legal advice for it. So whether you go through the refugee centre or ourselves, you're more than welcome to do that. But I do recommend challenging that, because of the fact that you haven't received a refusal, which is quite common, but sorry, the invite, which is quite common because a lot of people aren't receiving decisions, they're not receiving invite letters. It is happening. So I think the earlier you act on it and the sooner you act on it, the better for you. Someone also mentioned that the sponsor doesn't have hours at all. You've never worked for them, and you're struggling to get a switch, and your children are coming. If the employer okay, so the employer doesn't reply,
It's
and she only says online training. So that's very common, where employers don't have hours, and people are in situations where their employers aren't replying. So I think the best thing to do is to see if you can discuss it with the employer to get the hours. If they're not willing to negotiate, in all honesty, I recommend looking on Indeed, looking on looking on the Register of Licensed Sponsors, and making an application to regularize your stay in the UK. Um, and to be able to be able to maintain your visa. Maybe don't look in the care sector on its own. See if there's any other options that may possibly apply to you, and really broaden your opportunities that way, because there are jobs aside from care that you can do. So someone asked if the wife gets a certificate of sponsorship now, will the certificate of sponsorship be able to cover the wife and the whole family? And because she's already in the UK, and the whole family, she was a dependent, and now she wants to be the main applicant. It is entirely possible for her to be the main applicant. There's nothing to say that she can't be the main applicant. And for example, yourself, you can become the dependent, alongside any children involved. In terms of the certificate of sponsorship being able to cover her and the whole family, I'm not too sure if you're referring to maintenance, but that would be entirely up to the actual sponsor to decide. So if the sponsor wants to maintain and accommodate the stay on the certificate of sponsorship, they can. If they choose not to, then they're within their rights to also refuse if they want to. So it just does depend on that. But yes, your wife can switch to be the main applicant, and the sponsor can, and then you can be the dependent. So in terms of how long does it take between a immigration inspection and a company license to be revoked? So that's entirely up to the Home Office as to how long they will take to consider the breaches, what's happened, to see whether the license can, it doesn't necessarily mean that the actual license will be revoked. It can be that, there might be some pointers to act on, and it might be that they've suspended the license for some odd reason, and there's particular points which you need to act on. Um, or it could be that they've taken the decision to revoke it, and you now wish to um challenge that revocation. So in terms of the timescales, it really does depend on the Home Office in themselves. But if you are in a situation where your sponsor license has been revoked, we do have specialists who deal with that. So I do recommend booking in a business consultation to do that, and we will advise you of our charges and the process and how to do that. Someone asked how long is a further leave to remain visa and how much. So it depends on what further leave to remain visa you're referring to. So what visa in itself are you referring to? Um, so if you can clarify that for us, then we can definitely assist with that. We do also have WhatsApp community groups available. So if you are looking for a switch, and if we've got any opportunities, we do tend to post on there. So I do recommend going on to our website and the contact us page, where we do consider, where we would ideally consider yourselves as first options if we do have the opportunities available to us. And we've also got cluster groups which you can join, which you'd be asked to fill out just some information about yourself and what you're looking for, and we'll try our best to see if we can match you up to any opportunities if we do have them available. And there have been some people who have been lucky, and they've managed to secure themselves some opportunities, but we don't actively sort of find you the sponsors themselves. That's entirely down to you. But if we do have anyone that we're aware of, we do tend to post on those groups. How do you check if your employer has applied for a sponsorship for you? So they should have given you a certificate of sponsorship. So that's the main way in which to check, and then they would give you the go ahead to apply for your visa. If you haven't received a certificate of sponsorship and you've not received a go ahead and you've not received um a valid offer letter, then it could mean that you don't have a valid sponsorship, and your sponsor hasn't applied for it. Someone mentioned that they've got a ongoing police investigation which was work related, and can this affect their visa, what to do and how to maintain the stay? I recommend you book in a consultation with us because your matter is slightly complex and it will need due care and attention. So I think the best thing to do is to check that and to see what your options are. So I think book in a consultation. Um, Someone also mentioned that both you and your wife have a certificate of sponsorship. Can you become dependent on her certificate of sponsorship? Yes, you can become dependent on her sponsorship, as long as you're happy to do so. So yes, you can become dependent. You just have to make a separate application to be a dependent. Someone also mentioned that their BRP states that when you're no longer employed, does voluntary work count, for instance? So voluntary work, you are allowed to do voluntary work. It's referring to paid work that you can't. Someone also mentioned that you've got a 19-year-old who's on a dependent visa. Um, is he eligible to work full time? And dependents can work full time. So there's nothing to stop dependents from working, and they can work in any sector. Someone also asked that the company sponsorship has been suspended and one of the children has turned 18. If you get a switch, what happens to the 18-year-old? Were they under the age of 18 at the time of applying for the visa? Someone also mentioned that they've completed their master's degree on a student visa and they've been offered a course, and it appears their dependents will not be allowed to stay. Yes, so if you're a student and you're switching into a skilled worker visa, unfortunately, you would not be able to bring your dependents under the new immigration rules that came into effect on the 11th of March 2024. Someone's asking how long does it take for a switch cost application to be approved? So if you're referring to how long it takes for the actual costs to be approved, it takes it's currently taking around 16 to 18 weeks for the costs to be approved. And with regards to the visa in itself, so a visa as a skilled worker from outside of the UK is taking 3 weeks. So those who are inside the UK, it's currently taking longer than that. And it's currently taking around 8 weeks if you're inside the UK. But there is the option to do the priority service if you do have the funds to do so. Someone also mentioned they're currently trying for a switch and their child is 18. They're currently under full-time education and can't they still be the dependent because they're living with you? So it depends on what visa you're on. So are you a student? Are you a skilled worker? So it depends on that. Right. Someone also mentioned after receiving a fee waiver approval and submission of the actual application to extend the stay in the UK, how long is it taking to get a response or conclusion of the application to extend if you're already in the UK? So in terms of the fee waiver in itself, they're taking around 4 to 5 months to be decided. Um, so then it depends on what application you're making. For example, when I mentioned the FLR application, which is based on exceptional circumstances, that turnaround time can take 6 months. However, it can be much sooner than that. It just depends on the Home Office's capacity to take on to consider your case. It depends. So a caseworker might pick up your case and see if you've not got the sufficient if you've not got sufficient reasons and they might consider your application quite quickly. Or if, for example, you're applying for a switch into a skilled worker visa, then from within the UK, it can take about 8 weeks. So it just depends on what visa you're on for the actual response time. Right. And then someone mentioned, can you move from a dependent visa to another, still being a dependent? So it really depends. So what visa do you mean that you wish to switch to become another dependent? So someone also mentioned that they've switched and their daughter, who is a dependent on the previous course, is now 19 and in school as well as working part-time. So did you have a question about that one, or did you mean like can your daughter switch with you? If you can just clarify that for us. Someone also mentioned that they're a student finishing studies soon and got a job that has an annual income of less than 38,000. Does this mean the dependents who are already in the UK are not covered by this skilled worker visa? So it depends on what visa you're on. So healthcare visas can't bring their dependents, whereas um, skilled workers can still bring their dependents, but that you do have to be paid the appropriate salary in accordance with the guidance. So you'd need to check that you're being paid the appropriate salary in order to be able to also bring your dependents, because the salary is important not only for them, but it's also um important for your own visa. Someone also said, how do you deal with an issue where the company promises to renew the certificate of sponsorship and then delays at the Home Office to issue a certificate of sponsorship, which affects you? You applied for an extension, but the Home Office have given 10 days to send in a new certificate of sponsorship. So you can possibly get the employer to write a letter to the Home Office to say that the current switches are taking around 16 to 18 weeks, which is the current timescales that we've been told directly from the Home Office. But if they express their willingness to sponsor you and to state that, you'll be a valuable asset to the company, they may consider that and ask them to possibly place the application on hold until your certificate of sponsorship allocations do come through. Someone mentioned that they came on a sponsorship before the
Farhana,
new rules.
hi. Can I just jump in some
Yeah,
on the delays in certificates of sponsorship? Just
yeah,
just to stress that, as you said, that the employer can write a letter. So if there's been a delay in the certificate of sponsorship and someone is extending their leave to remain, then it's important for them to actually put the application in before their current visa expires. So, not to wait for the certificate of sponsorship to come out, but they should make the application and
yeah,
then have a letter from the sponsor to say that they're waiting for their certificates of sponsorship. And another thing that the sponsor can do is when they apply for their allocation, is to actually put the people's names so that the undefined COS will come with their names. And that can also be verified with the Home Office that we've applied, but we're waiting because the waiting times are really long. But I just wanted to stress on something that you said, just to make sure
Yeah,
people
definitely.
understand that they need to make the application. So they
Yeah,
shouldn't say, because my sponsor didn't have a new allocation of undefined COSs, I didn't apply. You then
yeah.
become an overstayer. And then even when it comes out, it's, you may not be able to apply. You may have to leave the country. So make sure you put an application in before your visa expires. So
Put
yeah,
in
I
the
just want
application before. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. No, I agree. The application needs to be put in before, and then to mention that the sponsor and to provide that supporting letter from the sponsor, and I think that would be very helpful. Someone's also mentioned that they've been applying for jobs, but their status has, since the sponsor revoked the cost, does say right of work on the share code. What do you do? You're still waiting for the 60-day letter. So if you know that the sponsor license has been revoked, then I suggest looking for a switch as soon as possible. Don't wait for the 60-day letter to come to you. Make the appropriate measures in order to regularize and maintain your visa. So yeah, don't wait for any 60-day letters to come for you. Just act on it as soon as you know that it's been revoked. Um, because that way you're covered and you're safe and you'll maintain your visa.
And just to add as well onto that, Farhana, that the 60-day letter is not anything to look forward to or anything to contact the Home Office about or anything to look for. If the license has been revoked, you just go about looking like what Farhana has said, looking for your switch. But don't, some people have been contacting the Home Office to say, I want the letter. But you don't want that letter because that letter will then give you, you're on a clock, and how quickly does
Shortening
60
your
days
time, yeah.
go? You're shortening your own time. So the Home Office have even said to like to some of the migration teams who contact them to say they're delaying issuing out the 60-day letters in order to give people the opportunity to look for other employment or switch to other visas. So that's what they've said to the migration team that we were talking with in our city. So it's important not to rush to get that 60-day letter and to just keep looking because you've got more time. If you can do some work experience, if you've had no experience, I've seen some people saying that I didn't work a lot for my sponsor because they didn't have hours. Look for experience, volunteer in nursing homes, volunteer so that you can get good references, volunteer so that you can integrate into the community, speak to people, improve your communication, your language, and do whatever you can do to make yourself more marketable because it's such a competitive market now. And when you apply, you're not just going to get a switch, but you've got to make yourself as appealable as possible to the employers. So do voluntary work, improve your if you don't have a driving license, if you have access to money, go for driving lessons, get your license so that you can be more marketable and you can put yourself ahead of the competition because it's a stiff. There's so many people looking for switches, and there are not many switches out there. So whilst if your sponsor's license has been revoked, you need to get ahead of others. So the 60-day letter is something that, of course, you need to look out for, but don't be looking forward to it or thinking, why have I not got mine? If you haven't got yours, thank God for that because you've got more
It gives you
time.
more time.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't for it.
Yeah, definitely. No, it gives you a lot more time. So like we said, don't wait for it. And if you are in the unfortunate situation where you have received a 60-day letter from the Home Office and you notice that like I said, there's a week or so for you to sort of have to make a decision as to what you want to do to maintain your visa, and you really want to stay in the UK and you've got a switch, but it's not that the costs aren't coming through. I honestly do recommend you do apply for that fee waiver. because that will buy you more time. But I don't recommend doing that before you've received your 60-day letter. It's only when you're realizing that you've only got like about a week left on your visa, because that is what I call a is my way of saying it's like a get out of jail card. It's in order to save you from becoming an overstayer at the time, and in order to just maintain your visa, um and to say to the Home Office, you're trying not to be an overstay. You're trying to explore your options, and you're trying to make the appropriate measures in order to be able to regularize your stay. Um, so in terms of someone asked a question to say that you came on a student visa with dependents, and you're wanting to switch to a care visa with your dependents after getting the costs. So under the current rules, as a student, you can't bring dependents on, you can't switch your dependents onto a healthcare visa. Um, Whereas if it's any other skilled worker visa, provided that you're being paid the right salary and you've got the right job offer and you meet the requirements, then you can potentially switch your dependents over, but just not on a healthcare visa under the current immigration rules. So when your certificate of sponsorship is revoked by your employer, but you didn't receive a 60-day notice from the Home Office, is your share code still valid before receiving the 60 days from the Home Office? So you'd need to check with the share code to see if your visa is actually still valid. And with the share codes, they usually do say when it's due to expire. Someone said you can't apply for you can't apply for the further leave to remain visa without the letter of 60 days. So don't wait for the 60-day letter to come to you, as Rumby mentioned. You've you've got to really act on it. So if you have got an alternative option, for example, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you've got a switch. It might be that you've got some severe medical grounds. It might be that you've got a British partner or a British child or a settled child, um, or you're wishing to explore an alternative route, that you believe that you meet the requirements. I recommend seek legal advice immediately, and explore your options in order to be able to regularize your stay, and to be able to find yourself a sponsor, or an alternative route. Someone mentioned, is the 60 days referring to 60 working days? So it's not referring to 60 working days, it's referring to 60 days from the date of the letter. But as I said, they're taking a bit of time to come through. Someone mentioned, how do you apply for a visa extension when 60 days are due to expire? So it depends on what visa you want to apply for, and it depends on how much time you've got left on. So I do recommend seeking legal advice in order to be able to do that.
And I just wanted to add as well to that, Farhana, that
Yeah. Yeah.
if the 60 days is expiring, the letter comes with a date, so you'll see that date. So keep that date in mind. And some of the routes that have been covered earlier on this evening, for you to switch are if you've got a job offer with another employer and you've got a new COS, and the spouses, the children. But if you don't have anything, then you've got the Home Office would expect you to return to your country of origin, or you can then make an application which is human rights application, where you are looking at your particular circumstances. So you can look at your particular circumstances and your situation. Today, we've just had a decision on a case where one of our clients was a student dependent and her relationship broke down. So she found herself with the curtailment letter and she was left with the 60 days. And she then made an application based on her particular circumstances, which involved her children, her health, the experiences that she had had in her marriage, which had been quite really bad case of domestic violence. So we were able to put all of that in an Article 3 claim. And so she went through the asylum route because she also needed, she had accommodation for her children, and she was waiting for that for quite a long time. Initially, it was refused, but it was allowed on appeal. So each person's circumstances are different. There's so much case law that is around and so many arguments that can be made. And, we had to get expert reports. We had to get a lot of independent evidence to support her case for it to be successful. So for everyone who is in that position, it's always best to seek legal advice, because you can't do a copy and paste situation, because your situation is different from the next person next door. Yeah. And so copying each other and because someone has done a fee waiver, I've seen people just doing it. But why are you doing it? What are you going to do?
Sometimes people don't need to do it.
Yeah, sometimes you don't, because you've still got 35 days and then you get a job offer, or you haven't even received the 60-day letter and you've still got leave until August. So each and every person should get advice about their situation. And we're not saying come to us. You can come to us, but we've got loads and loads of work. So we've got, we do have some capacity, but we're saying for yourself, not to advertise our services, but for your life and your future in England, if you intend to stay here, get the correct advice. Because solicitors will always know loopholes. They will know we've done this for years and years and years, and you're not the first group of people who reach the situation that you find yourself in. So if you get legal advice, you can then be guided on what to do relating to your circumstance. There are people from countries where you can claim asylum because of the situation in your country. There may be people who've been persecuted because of their religion, because of their sexuality, because of their political opinion. It depends. So that's the importance of getting legal advice. On these platforms, we can only give you general advice. On your WhatsApp groups, you can hear what someone else has done, but that might not relate to you. You might be someone who's got mental health problems. You might be someone who's got cancer. You might be someone who's got children with special needs, with cerebral palsy, with all sorts of illnesses. And we then are able to put together arguments for you, which we can put forward your case. So it's important to be able to get advice. People who do claim asylum, they can get legal aid. So, you can go to a solicitor who does legal aid. We don't do asylum legal aid, but we can refer you to people so that you can get the relevant advice that you need. So just stressing that when we're here, we're doing just general guidance, and there's no way for 180 people that you can get advice that's specific to you, but get advice that's specific for you, because you might resonate with something. You might think, okay, I've been a victim of domestic abuse. I've got a child with with special needs disabilities, or in my country I've been persecuted because of my sexuality. I'm a homosexual, or something like that. Then we can then look and see what the guidance says, where you fit in, and then help you to put your arguments forward to the Home Office. So I cannot stress enough the importance of getting legal advice that relates to your situation, so that we're not people doing a copy and paste. Sorry, Farhana, back to you. I've jumped in and gone on.
No worries at all. I think you've covered. I think you've just basically covered that really well. So I think yeah, that's it for today, to be honest with you, because we've reached the end of our time. But thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And like Rumbi said, it is really important for you to seek legal advice on your situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'd have to come to us, but do seek legal advice, because not every situation is the same. So I think it's really important for you to seek legal advice because your situation may be different, and it might be that you've got an alternative route that you may not have even considered. So it's always best to seek legal advice. So thank you so much for
Farhana,
staying.
Farhana,
Yeah.
before we finish, is there one case that you can think of where somebody has been able to navigate the rules in a different way that you want to share on, or is that putting you on the spot?
No, there is actually. There's been so for example, some people who are dependents, for example, they don't necessarily always know that they might have had a relationship breakdown and they think that it's just generally a relationship breakdown. But they might actually be going through abuse. I'm not saying it's specifically to like, certain individuals, but there was an individual that they when they actually spoke to us, they realized that what they were going through wasn't a relationship breakdown. It was actually more, there was more to it, and they were suffering silently, but they just didn't want to speak up because they didn't know what situation they were going through. So then, we assisted them with exploring their options. So I think it is really good to seek advice, or it might even be that you've realized that you've got medical circumstances, and your medical evidence is very strong. So you may wish to make a claim based on your medical circumstances. So it is always good to explore your options based on that.
Thank you so much, Farhana, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you, Rumbi, as well for sharing and helping us. So at Tulia, our services include legal advice on UK immigration. We help people with visa applications, be it skilled worker, visitor, you name it, appeals and administration reviews, and all that. You can also What you can do now is to book a free consultation or even a paid one. And you can also follow us on social media. You can also volunteer with us at Tulia. And you can also join one of our community groups for latest updates, peer support, even switches. Some of the groups, people share switches and just share advice. So if you'd like to join one of those, we've put links in the chat. Or if you didn't manage to click on there, you can go onto our website, which is